Tonight on Greater Boston, in 1993, he pled guilty to the murder of Dorchester teen Louis D. Brown, the son of legendary violence prevention advocate Clementina Cherry. But Charles Bogues now contends he did not kill the 15-year-old. He's taking his side of the story public, and he joins me just ahead. Then later, the co-chair of the Tufts Children's Hospital Nurses Union and a mother who says that hospital has been a lifeline for her 3 kids. They join me on the planned closure and their many concerns. We've talked a lot over the years about Louis D. Brown, a promising kid from Dorchester who dreamed of being the country's first black president and was on his way to a Teens Against Gang Violence Christmas party in 1993 when he was shot and killed by a stray bullet in a gang shootout. His mother, as I said, Clementina Cherry, went on to found the Louis D. Brown Peace Institute in his honor and has joined me many times to talk about the work she's done to address the kind of violence that killed her son. Back in 2017, she came on the show along with a man who pled guilty to Louis's murder, Charles Bogues, whose 2012 parole she went on record as not opposing after he spent 16 years in jail.
I know that I have a debt that I owe to the Cherry family and to society.
But since long before that appearance, Bogues has been trying to reverse his guilty plea, accusing Boston prosecutors, even his own lawyer, of talking him into taking responsibility for the shooting. And on December 30th, he released a nearly hour-long YouTube video in which he lays out his case.
This is my story, and it needs to be told because I didn't kill Louis D. Brown.
Charles Bogues joins me with that story now. We invited Clementina Cherry as well, but she declined for the time being, wanting to allow him to share his side. Charles, welcome. It's good to see you again.
Good to see you. Thank you.
If you did not kill Louis D. Brown, why did you plead guilty to his murder?
When I was dealing with the prosecution office and my previous attorney, they had told me that because I was involved in the shootout, that a bullet probably ricocheted, and that's what killed Louis Brown. A ricocheted bullet that they told me came from a gun that I possessed. And when I was incarcerated, people would be coming in telling me, that you didn't kill that kid. And I started digging into my case, and, with the help of one of the judges that allowed me to do ballistical testing, I was able to, in my eyes, prove that I didn't kill Louis Brown. And that's what I lay out in the video, that they knew when I pled guilty that I wasn't the person who killed Louis Brown.
But just so that I'm clear, when you did plead guilty, you did believe that you were responsible for his murder. Is that correct?
Yes, because they told me that a bullet ricocheted. I was, in the gunfight that occurred that day. So I wanted to take responsibility for what they told me that I did.
So you mentioned a minute ago that some of your fellow inmates say you didn't kill Louis. That led you to thinking. You got some legal training in jail from a fellow inmate who was a jailhouse lawyer. You made a request for documents, some of which you got, as you say, after some assistance from a judge. Give us a couple examples of what you were able to receive from those document requests that convinced you that, one, you were not the guy, and two, that the law enforcement people, the cops and the DA, knew you were not the guy.
Well, the first thing that I received was the grand jury minutes of what was said under oath to the grand jury. And at the grand jury hearing, the officers that were involved in the case said that there was only one .45 caliber firearm used that day. And that's how they presented it to me. They said you were the only person that had a .45 caliber, so the bullet ricocheted and killed Louis. And then when I got the documents from a public records request, I was able to present that to a judge, and the judge allowed me to do ballistical testing. And there was actually about 3 different .45s that was fired that day from different individuals. And the shell casing that they said that they attributed to my gun, they didn't match the bullet that they retrieved from Louis Brown. That was the first thing. Second thing was that they had eyewitnesses that actually saw the person who shot and killed Louis Brown, and the person didn't look like me at all. So those 2 factors, plus, when you look at the documents when the documents are dated, and as opposed to when they convened the grand jury, you can tell that they had all the evidence before they went to the grand jury and they lied about it.
So you were, let's just be clear for people unfamiliar with the story, even though I'm sure they've heard of Lewis, and I'm sure in this community they know his mother and the incredible work she has done in this community. You were there, you did have a .45, you did discharge that weapon, you shot it. So explain again how you know that that was not the weapon, since you did fire it in the area where Lewis was killed. How do you know it wasn't your .45? Simply by virtue of the fact that you contend that the bullets don't match that weapon, is that correct?
No, there's more. When Lewis was killed, I was around the corner from where Lewis was killed. And at my plea hearing, I said in open court, I never saw Lewis that day. I was around the corner from where he was shot. And therein lies the ricochet theory that they presented to me, because I told them when they debriefed me that I was around the corner from where Lewis was killed. I couldn't have shot him. And that's when they told me that a bullet ricocheted. And then when you match where they did find the ballistical evidence that they attributed to me, it is in fact around the corner from where Lewis was shot. So if you take where I was, where the ballistical evidence was found, the fact that he was around the corner, and the fact that the ballistics don't match, then it's evident, along with the eyewitness testimony that was precluded from the grand jury, they knew I didn't kill Lewis.
So Charles, if it's so clear, that evidence, as you suggest, you filed for a new trial, I think it was in 2007. The DA at the time was Dan Conley in Suffolk County. Here's what he said in response to your motion. There's not a single aspect of the evidence suggesting that anyone but Charles Bogues, who pleaded guilty to murder, shot and killed Louis D. Brown. If the evidence was so convincing, why did Conley say what he said?
Because it wasn't. And that's why they never gave me an evidentiary hearing. If it was so convincing and I had nothing to go on, then why would the judge allow me to do ballistical testing? Because if you look at the grand jury testimony that they testified to under oath, they said that there was only 145 discharged at the scene and I was the only person who had one. So why did the ballistics come back? And the Boston police tested the ballistics as also along with my ballistician that the court gave me, and they both came to the same conclusion, that there were multiple 45s fired at the scene. The ballistics didn't match the gun that they said that I had, and that witnesses testified or made statements that they saw the person who killed Lewis and the person didn't match me physically or in clothing.
So, Charles, do you have a theory as to why 3 years after the fact the cops identified you, why, according to you, they chose not to share exculpatory evidence with you or your lawyers? Why do you think they decided to finger you if you were not the guy?
Because I was there and I had participated in that gunfight, and the gunfight didn't really have anything to do with me, but one of the people that was giving them information fingered me in this case.
So, Louis, you said on that little clip I played a minute ago when you were here with Clementina Cherry in 2017, and you actually spoke at her event with her, I think just right before that, the Mother's Day March for Peace, which focuses on families who have lost people they love to violence every Mother's Day. You said you owed a debt to the Cherry family. If you didn't kill Lewis and you believed in 2017 that you didn't kill Lewis, what was that debt you described to me in the audience?
Because I was in my community doing the wrong things. So that's why I said I owe a debt to her family, and I also owe a debt to the community. And I've been working my hardest since I was released to repay that debt. I go into the prisons and speak to guys. I go to community centers and speak. So the debt, because I didn't kill Lewis, that does not reduce the debt I owe to my community and society as a whole.
Did you speak to Ms. Cherry before you posted that almost hour-long video? And by the way, in it, you explained document by document in great detail why you believe the case is clear that you were not responsible for her son's murder. Did you talk to her before you released that video?
Yes.
And what was her reaction?
I sent her the video before I released it, and I wanted her to see what I was, what I was presenting. I had presented these documents to Ms. Cherry prior to that over the years, but until it's always somebody else telling your story. And unfortunately, my mother had passed away in 2020 and from cancer. And I had about a 4-month period to really talk to her and talk to her about legacy and the legacy that she left. And we talked about, because my mother also knew about this information. And I had talked to her about, just wanting it to be out there so that being the person who was responsible, that was deemed responsible for Louis Brown's death, I didn't want that to be my legacy. That when people look up my name on the internet, the first thing that comes up is he's the person who killed Louis Brown, and I wanted to dispel that.
For people unfamiliar with the story, while you're still incarcerated, Clementina Cherry reached out to your mother and developed a relationship with her that ultimately she developed with you. When we asked Ms. Cherry to join us, she declined, at least this time. She sent us a statement over the weekend. I'm praying to my God that there can be a deep investigation into this case based on the video and what Mr. Bogues presented. I have so many questions. I've reached out to the new DA, and I'm looking forward to speaking with him in hopes he'll make this and cases like this a priority. And we should say also, at the time that you filed your motion for a new trial in 2007, she's quoted as saying, my fear is that he didn't do it. And she has subsequently said that she was wondering why the law enforcement people didn't go after other people involved in this thing. Charles, do you know who killed Louis Brown?
No, I don't.
Why do you not know? If some people who knew you knew enough to tell you that you were not responsible, did they not know who was responsible?
There's certain questions that you don't ask when you're in the neighborhoods and in the street life. The initial incident that happened with Louis didn't have anything to do with me. I wasn't the target. I wasn't, I was going to the neighborhood to meet up with a friend. And I was, selling drugs and stuff at the time. And that's why I had a gun with me. And the shootout didn't have anything to do with me. And those guys were targeted and I didn't get shot. So after the whole incident happened, I never asked who it was because, again, it didn't have anything to do with me. I wasn't, involved with that.
If the new DA decided to take a look at this case, do you believe that his team plus the police could find out 28 years after the fact who was responsible for Louis's murder if it wasn't you?
I'm not sure. They would have to, talk to their sources and everything to determine that. I never asked because people, when they come and tell you something, you have to take it with a grain of salt. But as I started digging deeper in the roadblock that was, set up before me, I kind of knew that I was on the right track.
I never met Louis, but through his mother, I've learned a lot about him, and he was an incredible young man. And you said at one point, you hoped that your son grew up to be like Louis, that you hoped to push him in the direction of growing up to be like Louis D. Brown was and would have been. Do you still feel that way?
Yes. He was, for all accounts, Louis is an incredible young man. My son is also a very gifted and incredible young man. For our community, for him to grow up without a father in his life physically and, growing up between his mother, my mother, the women in my family did a tremendous job. He's 32 years old, never been in handcuffs, and that's a blessing to me. Charles, went to college, the whole thing.
Charles, we appreciate your time. We hope to speak to the district attorney about this. We hope to speak to Clementina Cherry about it, and we will stay on this. Thank you very much for giving us some time tonight.
Well, thank you.
About 100 parents and Tufts Children's Hospital staff gathered outside the facility Saturday to protest its planned closure. The hospital announced the move last month, saying kids' specialized pediatric outpatient care, day surgery, and the neonatal ICU would remain at Tufts, but any kids who require inpatient care would be transferred to Boston Children's Hospital starting in July if state health officials approved. Tufts executives say the change would let them convert the 41 beds in the children's unit to adult care, noting they've been turning away dozens of seriously sick adult patients each day, while they say its pediatric inpatient unit is usually only half full. But many parents and staff say the switch is nowhere near so simple, and as of this taping, close to 64,000 people had signed a petition calling on Tufts to save Tufts Children's. Joining me are Mary Havlick Cornacchia, she's co-chair of the Massachusetts Nurses Association Union at Tufts, and Amanda Crowley, a parent of 3 children who've been treated at the hospital and co-founder of Mending Minds Foundation, aimed at figuring out why and how young kids develop certain diseases. We also invited Tufts CEO Dr. Michael Tarnoff to join us. He was unable to do so today, but indicated he might be willing in the coming days. And a spokesperson sent a statement that reads in part, "Our intent is to ensure that children will be able to continue to see their same doctor, care team in the same clinic with their current insurance. We remain committed to supporting our communities and families with the same high-quality, compassionate care they've come to expect and deserve." Amanda and Mary, thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Mary,
can.
thank you. Can I start with you, Mary? What concerns you most about this the decision?
We're most concerned about the children and their families. Tufts serves an underserved population. We accept all kinds of insurances and even no insurance, and we don't turn away children. That is not the case at Children's Hospital. They are selective in the type of patients that they do care for. And we're just worried that the number of people that we serve in our community will fall through the cracks.
Amanda, I know for you it is very, very personal. Can you describe why this matters so much to you?
This is a lifeline, a crucial lifeline to so many families like mine. We were completely blindsided by this announcement. And honestly, we're scared and we feel stranded. We're dependent on Tufts for a very specialized kind of care for really complex kids. Tufts is known for having teams that work really well together and treat very complex illness. And for my kids who have a diagnosis of PANDAS, which is a pediatric autoimmune neuropsychiatric disorders associated with strep, this is a medical home for this condition.
And Children's Hospital, from what I understand, does not provide the immune therapy for PANDAS that Tufts does. Is that correct?
That's right.
So what do they say to you, assuming that they go ahead with the shutdown of the inpatient beds? What do they say you should do and your children do? We
have a lot of questions right now. We don't have answers, and that's where we're stuck right now. This is terrible timing. We're in the middle of a pandemic. Families are in extreme crisis already, and then to lose access to critical care is just unfathomable. It's unconscionable.
Amanda, if I can stay with you just for a second, I know. Sure. I read that all 3 of your children suffer from PANDAS, your middle kid in particular. It's hard to ask this question, but what happens to your middle son if this move happens and there's not replacement therapy?
Well, like my son and hundreds of other kids who are diagnosed with PANDAS, but other immune deficiencies, other autoimmune conditions that depend on this kind of specialized care, we don't have another place to go. 5 months or less than 5 months gives us no time to find another place to have our children treated.
And what would happen to your kid if the treatment was not available?
I don't know. I'm scared.
You know, Mary, you mentioned the insurance thing, and I'm sure you've read the quotes or heard the quotes from Dr. Churchwell, who runs Boston Children's, and a spokesperson says if there are gaps in coverage, we'll work with those insurers to cover those children, as we always do. And he goes on like that. It was in the Boston Globe. Do you not believe them, or you're not buying it, or what?
So we have true concerns, Jim, and mostly because we see the children that Children's turns away. We treat them in our emergency rooms. We admit them to our inpatient facilities. Right now we're experiencing a dramatic pediatric mental health crisis. We admit those children and we care for them. It's not a psychiatric facility, but we don't turn them away and we don't make them languish in emergency rooms waiting for beds. We take them in, and that's a huge concern. It's a big problem right now.
Mary, when people, assuming that Tufts Children's does make this change, and they are turned away from Boston Children's Hospital, as you suggest, and we will reach out to them to hear from them as well, what happens to those kids?
That's a great question. I know that Mass General has a pediatric facility, and so does Boston Medical Center, but we take on patients from those facilities also. We're a feeding hospital from Lawrence and Lowell. There aren't enough beds around, and we provide a resource to a large number.
Mary, again, I said in the beginning, in the introduction to both you and Amanda, that the hospital, the Tufts, is saying we don't fill nearly all of the children's inpatient beds, and we have a demand that far exceeds the number of adult beds. Is that true from your perspective?
So, administration works largely in the law of averages. Up through last week, we've been full on the pediatric side. We were short 2 patients of full on Friday. And our pediatric staff has been putting in overtime to meet the demands of the census on our pediatric side.
So what do you think is behind this, Mary? You work there. What's the agenda?
Oh, I do work there. And, Jim, we, as a union, we meet with administration on a monthly basis, and we've had conversations about census over the last years. But this closure was never tabled. So it was a blindsided move to. But
why are they doing it? I'm trying to ascertain if it's going to. Why are they doing it from your perspective?
So from my perspective, we offer an awful lot of resources. And I think that the hospital is just not feeling like they see enough volume in every kind of resource that we offer that makes it a marketable and manageable thing to maintain.
Can I translate that? Are you saying they're doing it because of the bottom line? I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I want to understand. Is that what you're suggesting?
It feels like that they're putting dollar signs on children. Yes.
Well, Mary, staying with you for 1 second, what I don't understand, and I don't know enough to, obviously, I'm just know what I read and speaking to you, and hopefully we'll get to speak to Dr. Tarnoff soon. They're not closing outpatient services. They're not closing the newborn ICU. If money was the primary issue, why would they not be closing those services?
Here's our fear, Jim. These physicians that were also blindsided, a number of them were, the hospital's expecting that it's going to be a smooth and collaborative transition to Children's Hospital. And that is not going to be the case.
Why?
Because there are physicians that are choosing not to go to Children's. They're choosing to interview at other facilities or even moving away from the area. So, what Amanda mentioned, we have critical teams that are resources to these families, many people involved in the care of these children. And it's not going to be an easy, let's just pop them in the car and drive them to Children's on July 1st. And the hospital will tell you that they've thought this out. It's going to be a process. It's not just going to be a drop off and drive by. But the fact is, they're counting on things happening that just don't look like they're falling into place in the manner that they think that it will.
Amanda, almost every question I'm asking you, I hesitate because I have kids too, and I obviously, they can tell by the look on your face and your voice what this means to you. Do you have hope that this can be resolved? I mean, you've put a lot of trust in Tufts in the past. Do you have any trust going forward that they'll listen to you and the 64,000 people who've signed the petition and Mary and revisit this?
I think we have to fight for this. You know, we have to get our voices heard. I'm willing to meet with whoever would like to meet. I represent, I'm here on behalf of, thousands of families from Tufts. I mean, there's families who don't have a voice here right now. Speaking to a mom who has 15 specialists for her child and works 2 jobs as a single mom. I mean, how is this going to happen? How are we going to transfer, our case is complex enough. How is somebody with 15 specialists going to make this move seamlessly? I mean, it's just impossible. And the timeline is so short. This just happened so quickly and unexpectedly.
Let me just say, considering the potential human cost here, I hope that Dr. Tarnoff will see fit to join us here, to Dr. Churchwell as well. And I surely hope that they'll both see fit to meet with you and others. So I thank you very much for telling your story tonight, and I wish you a lot of luck. Amanda and Mary, thank you.
Thank you so much, Jim. We're so grateful.
Thank you. That's it for tonight. Please come back tomorrow when I'll be joined by all 3 Democratic candidates for Massachusetts Attorney General, former Boston City Councilor Andrea Campbell, former nominee for Lieutenant Governor Quentin Palfrey, and Attorney Shannon Liss-Riordan. And mark your calendars, exactly 1 week from today, Paris Alston and Jeremy Siegel take over the mic on an all-new GBH Morning Edition, focusing on emerging voices, diverse perspectives, depth, and context. They'll get your morning going in a whole new way. It all starts next Monday at 5 a.m. on GBH 89.7 or streaming online and in the GBH News app. You can also find out more about Paris and Jeremy and the show before the big day at gbhnews.org/morning edition. For now, though, thanks for watching. Please stay safe. Tomorrow, I'll talk to all 3 Democrats running to replace Maura Healey as Attorney General, former City Councilor Andrea Campbell, former nominee for Lieutenant Governor Quentin Palfrey, and Attorney Shannon Liss-Riordan. That's tomorrow at 7.